So as we talk about self-service data management in Tableau, it's important to understand that it's part of the overall platform. In the Tableau suite, we have what we've always been known for, which is self-service analytics, analytics for anyone with any data, and it's what we've essentially done from day one. Over the recent years, we've added smart capabilities, leveraging AI in various ways, such as through recommendations with data sources, explain data, and the like. But for today, we're going to be focusing on just the self-service data management piece. So why is self-service data management important? Well, if a user wants to build a viz, if they want to use Ask Data, explain data, or any of the capabilities within the platform, they need to be able to find data. And once they find it, they may need to prepare that data. They need to know if it's trustworthy or not. And if I'm an admin or a data steward, I need to be able to change and govern that data appropriately. We need all four of those so that I can take advantage of the capabilities that Tableau has to offer. So when we got in this space, we noticed two key trends. There's a change in data and a change in people. On the data side, what we see changing is there's more and more and more of it. But that's really not particularly interesting. It's been that case for the last 10 or so years. But what we do find interesting is it's more diverse data. Not only in the format per se, but what we see with our customers is there's enterprise data, there's departmental data, team data, and personal data. In traditional data management platforms, just focus on enterprise data. But if I have applications for just my team or department, I need to be able to find and prepare and share that data as well. So customers need solutions that encompass all of that data. And third, as the data volume's exploding and as more applications come into the environment, there's less centralization. I might not be able to put all of it into a single place, into a single data warehouse for that matter. And instead, we may just have to connect to it where it is. And on the other side, we see a change in people. Analytics is now just expected. More and more people need data and analysis to do their jobs. And second, we see more people getting access to tools so that they can do their job. I can use tools like Tableau Desktop or Prep to connect and prepare a data set and do things with it. But bridging that gap is still challenging today. Most of the tools for accessing that data and bringing it together are still the domain of IT. There are a lot of tools built just for IT professionals and data engineers to use, and they're not necessarily helping end users directly. The result is usually duplicated data. And when I see duplicated data, I'm not sure which version to trust, which is the right one to do sales reporting or to look at defects that are out there. And sometimes this can cause IT to say, look, let's just lock it down because we don't know what people are going to do. And this tension between data and people means there's an opportunity for our customers to be able to let end users connect to that data while also being able to govern it effectively. So Tableau's perspective on this is we're trying to create a convergence. There are a lot of point solutions in the industry. Data cataloging capabilities where I can do lineage and certification, discover data, but I can't really finish an end-to-end use case. Once I find data, I go to my data prep tool where I can clean it, combine it, aggregate it. If I'm trying to figure out the right master data or how to conform the data that I'm working with to become master data, that's yet another system. Then, of course, my analytics system. And then once I figure out what data source I need to connect to, then I have to figure out how do I actually access it, meaning what username and password, am I using the right database or not? And so what we see is an opportunity to converge parts of each of these solutions, and we think of this as self-service data management. So I can centralize access to my data and the metadata and share that throughout the organization. And meanwhile, IT has a way to monitor compliance. So that's what self-service data management is. To us, it's about helping people govern, discover, trust, and operationalize their data. And that's comprised of three things. First is Tableau Prep Builder. It's a visual and direct way to clean and join, aggregate, prepare, shape your data for analysis. Second is to operationalize it. Obviously the first part is very challenging, and that battle of getting it into the right shape. But if you want to keep it fresh and up to date, you need to make sure you can schedule it. You need to know when it breaks and monitor it accordingly to make sure that the data quality is continued. And third is the Tableau catalog. And that's where I discover data sets that I can use, determine whether I can trust them, and govern that data through lineage and impact. So let's take a look. And let's start with Tableau Prep Builder. So this is an existing flow that I've already created, basically connecting to a variety of different data sources listed out with the bubbles on the left-hand side. And what I can start to see is that we're doing various steps. We're taking certain actions on each of those. In this first one, it looks like we're removing nulls. I can see there's a filter icon to indicate that. In the second one, we're adjusting some data types. The third one, we're grouping states, and again, this is based off of not only the description, but also the image there to indicate certain steps. And I can also see those individual steps in the list of changes down here, so that I can start to do get some full understanding of what's actually taking place at each of these various steps. And we're not going to go through these one by one because obviously there's a lot, but I do want you to understand what's actually happening before we get to the final outputs of data that's ready for analysis. So we're going through these various steps. We're combining them into a union. We're actually stacking these 4 different data sources after the changes on one on top of another, then doing a join, then going through some additional steps such as the aggregation, and then providing 2 output nodes as well for creating those data sources for our analysis. And we're not actually going to execute this, but instead what I'm going to do is publish this up to Tableau server. In this case, I'm using Tableau Online, but it's applicable for both. And so we'll say this is going to be our data management flow example. And I'll just say publish. And like I mentioned before, this isn't actually going to execute it. It's simply going to take this flow in its current state and save it on Tableau Server or Tableau Online so that it can be executed utilizing the hardware resources, I should say, that exist within the server environment, as opposed to going through these complex and convoluted steps on your laptop, which can be very taxing for the machine. So it's leveraging the horsepower of the Tableau server. And now that flow is published up there and saved, it can be executed. As soon as you publish a flow up, you see that we get on the initial landing page of that flow, where we have the overview, which describes the list of different output steps. We can certainly run those one at a time. We'll get to that momentarily. It's also got the image, and as we all know, an image is worth 1,000 words. So now I can start to see the full details in its entirety just from this image on the home screen of this flow. I've also got the list of various connections that are associated with it. Any scheduled tasks, we'll come back to this in just a second when we actually set it up to execute on a scheduled basis. We've got the run history. Because we haven't run it, nothing is there yet. And lineage, which we'll come back to this in just a second. But the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm actually going to schedule this to run. So we'll associate a new task, and let's just say weekly 10 a.m. on Sunday mornings. And if I so wanted to, I could actually set this up so that each of the different output steps could run independently, meaning different schedules. But for our purposes, we can run them together on the same schedule and then just say create a task. Now, because I don't want to actually wait another couple days to run this on that automated task, or on that automated schedule, I should say, I'm just going to run it now. And so you can certainly run these manually in addition to the scheduled basis. But again, the benefit here is that it's running utilizing the hardware of Tableau server. It has nothing to do with my Tableau desktop anymore, my laptop, I should say, anymore. And if I go over to the overview tab, I see the current status that it is in fact executing. This shouldn't take too long. But while that is running, I'll quickly describe the Lineage tab. And you'll start to see that when I click on Lineage, I get the full list of fields that are contained within the outputs. And more importantly, I see the lineage on the right-hand side so that as workbooks, data sources, and individual dashboards or sheets get created off of this, they'll show up and be listed out here. And so what the lineage offers is the ability to get beyond the black box that a particular object was before, right? Specifically data sources. Historically, you would see that a data source existed, you would see associated workbooks, but really not much else beyond that. And you'd really have to get into the one-to-one relationship as opposed to seeing a full list of a data source to any workbooks that are created off of it. We'll get into this a little bit further as we dig deeper into the catalog portion, but I just wanted to introduce the concept here. So let's go back and see if that flow has run. It certainly looks like it has. So now let's actually get into the lineage in more detail. Now, obviously, because this flow has just been published up, we haven't had the time to create anything off of it, specifically a workbook. But let me show you an existing example so that you can see the catalog in action. First off, as you log into Tableau Server, you'll now see a new navigation object, and that's going to be the external assets shown here on the left-hand side. Well, what this is showing is objects in the form of databases and files and even tables, specific database tables, that are essentially the underlying sources for your Tableau data sources and workbooks. And as a data steward, this is helpful information because I see the list of databases, and some of them even have either the same name or similar names. But I also have some context visually in the form of answering the question of what's popular, what's being used, just by seeing the list of workbooks that are created off of that. And again, being a data steward, usually I'm pretty familiar with database names that are in our system, so I can start to see, I personally have the experience. I know that I've worked with this particular database in the past, so that's the information that's very helpful for me to see just with the full server path to the actual database, the name, and the connection type. Now, as I click on inside of this database, and again, this is where we're getting further and further into more detail that we didn't have visibility to within the Tableau platform, I see the list of tables. And I've also got the quick views as far as the number of workbooks and data sources created off of that. And this is where the lineage really helps because I've got several objects that are built from this particular database. Right? I see the one flow, I see 7 workbooks, 41 different worksheets, 11 dashboards, and 3 content owners. So now I start, as a data steward, I start to have some visibility and more importantly, some understanding in terms of impact. If something were to change with this database for whatever reason, how broad is that impact? This lineage and the count of objects is going to show me that quickly and effectively. And even as we get into individual columns within a certain table, that lineage is still there and that impact is still there. So I can see that we've got product name. Well, how many databases, or excuse me, how many worksheets and dashboards further downstream are actually utilizing this column? I see that there's about half the dashboards, but not very many worksheets. This is an opportunity to potentially do some cleanup and remove fields that are not being used. And so this visibility is incredibly helpful. Now, the lineage is only one piece of the data catalog. It's a very significant piece, but there's another piece that, and I think it's just as impactful, and that is the ability to communicate further downstream. So in a situation where, and as we all know, data is very fluid, database changes take place quite often, and historically there was a challenge in how to communicate those changes effectively to the user base. Usually it's an email blast, and how often does that get lost with the users? Well, let's go through a scenario where I, as the data steward, I need to let people know that, hey, we've got an upcoming database change. I can do that through this quality warning. And I'll enable the warning, and I can go through one of 4 different warning types. Just a basic warning, deprecated data, stale data, or under maintenance. I'm going to say under maintenance. And as far as the message that I want to communicate out to my users, I'm going to let them know that we've got a region column that is going to be going through some changes. The company is going to do some territory alignment. We're going to need to update this region field. And as this is planned for the next couple of weeks, the users need to be made aware of this so that they can understand the reliability of the data that's showing up in their workbooks. So I'm going to hit save. And now you'll see that there's a new icon there that's actually just the information warning, the under maintenance. And if I were to go back to the external assets, you should see that is reflected right there as well. And of course, I can click on that and see the full note. But again, this note is more for the people downstream that are not aware of how the data is managed. So let's pivot over to a different user. And in this case, I'm logged in as Sam, whereas in the previous instance, as the data steward, I'm logged in as myself, Rob Levine. So now as Sam, as he's going through his daily tasks, he's going to click on his favorites. He's going to open up a workbook that he looks at on a daily or weekly basis. And as he starts to do his analysis, once this loads, you'll see that there's actually a new tab up at the very top, and that's called the data details. I'll wait just another second for this to load. But I see that the data details, and more importantly, I see that there's the blue icon there that's calling out to me. So I click on data details, and this is how that communication takes place. Right. So again, instead of having to do an email blast or notify someone through another somewhat complicated mechanism and hope that they actually see the message, this data details is a quick and easy way to reflect that. So now as Sam is going through his analysis, he opens up the data details. He sees that we've got a maintenance flag. He clicks on that. He sees the message from the data steward about the change to the region field, and we can go ahead and update our workbook. By the way, before we do that, in addition to some of those basic properties around around the data itself, in terms of the number of views of the dashboard, some of the basic properties around the workbook, and specifically the data source, I've also got descriptive information on the number of fields that exist within the views here, along with some additional properties about them. So for example, I can start to see that some of these are calculated fields. Order profitable based on the equal sign, same thing with profit per order. And more importantly, I've actually got visibility that I didn't have before, because now I can see the full calculation. So now instead of just not knowing what the definition of a column of data may be, I can start to see this, so I've got even more visibility than I had before. But let's get to the task at hand, and let's update our workbook to reflect the appropriate column of data. So I'll come in and use web edit, and then we'll go in and make that switch on the region field. Okay, so now that that's loaded, I'll go over to our map. And I see that the map actually has 2 layers to it, one with the states colored by their region. somewhat a little bit shaded out, and then I've got the individual bubbles that are reflecting uh, uh, specific cities along with the profit ratio and sales per customer. So what I want to do is go to the states themselves. I see that in that case we're actually coloring each individual state by its region, and let's take that region new field and simply replace it. And so now that new territory alignment should be reflected. And as we wait for the changes to come through, I should see that that those four colors change. Specifically, what I noticed was that Michigan, Indiana, Kentucky, and Virginia all changed territory. Just to see that again, if I undo, I see that it'll go back to the old territory alignment. And of course, when we redo, it's applying that new region. So at that point, I can hit save and I can proceed with my analysis. So I'll save that. I'll close that out to go back to the dashboard. And then load this back up. Oh, I don't think that. There we go. So let's go back to our customer analysis. See that that dashboard is reflecting the new regions, and then we can continue on with our daily tasks. And that's all thanks to the data details tab, and of course the message that was communicated by the data steward. That I'm able to read in context in the throughout the daily flow that I would have, instead of having to go from my inbox and potentially overlook it or forget about it. I see it within just the view itself here. So just to summarize, what the data management piece is really giving us is the ability for everyone to trust the data that they're working off of. It's no longer a black box. You actually have full understanding of how that data is generated, how it's impacting both upstream and downstream in terms of the number of workbooks, the number of dashboards, even the number of owners of content. It's a way to communicate effectively between them, and provides that discoverability as needed.